Hello my magic beach bums, I am Yomi, welcome to today's teaching. Before I tell you today's story, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out when we upload new lessons. Today I am going to tell you a story, to teach you about how difficult it is to see the light in the world, when there is often so much darkness. In learning this lesson, you will be able to let more light and love into your life, and into the lives of the people you meet. On the outskirts of the Sierra Leonean city of Freetown, there lived a teenage boy called Alpha. His family life was very difficult, because both of his parents drank a lot of alcohol, would often waste the little money they had, and would fight one another. Although the boy was able to escape his troubled home, by going to school every day, he did not enjoy it there. He really liked to learn, but he did not like the way the other pupils treated him. Everybody in the neighborhood gossiped about Alpha's mother and father, and the other children would often mock and bully him in the classroom. This left Alpha feeling so very lonely in his life. One day, as the class waited for Teacher Freeman to come into the room, one of the boys decided to throw a pencil at Alpha. This made most of the other students laugh, but it was not funny for Alpha. He didn't understand why they treated him in such a way, why they could not see that he needed love and friendship, not cruelty. He looked around the room at the other pupils, and felt so sad. A young girl was sitting on the other side of the room, by the bright window. She was new to the school, and she was called Precious. Although she and Alpha had never talked, he could see that she felt and understood his pain and upset. She smiled at the lonely boy, but Alpha quickly looked away, because he was embarrassed. Outside the classroom, the children could not see that Mr. Freeman was watching their behavior. He had seen them treat Alpha in this way many times before, and he did not like what he was seeing. Suddenly an idea rose up in his mind, and he quickly walked away from the class, and along the corridor. When the teacher came back, a few moments later, the class fell silent as he entered. He was carrying a pile of papers, and he walked from desk to desk, placing a single sheet of paper, face down. The final desk he placed a sheet of paper on, was that of Alpha, and as the lonely boy looked up at his teacher, Mr. Freeman smiled warmly at him. The teacher spoke sternly, "Children, today we are going to have a test, and you will have 10 minutes to complete it." He looked towards the clock on the wall. It was 11 a.m. The teacher spoke again, "You may now turn over your papers, and begin." As each child did as they were told, they were all taken aback by what the test consisted of. On the sheet of paper, there were no questions, but instead, just a single black dot in the center of the page. When the teacher saw their confused expressions, he spoke once more, "Your test is to write about what you observe on the paper." Now even more perplexed, the pupils began to look across the room at one another. Mr. Freeman spoke again, "Come now children, the clock is already ticking." Looking down at their tests, each student began to write. After only 1 minute, one girl stopped writing, and placed her pencil on her desk. She raised her hand and proudly spoke, "Mr. Freeman, I have finished first." The teacher smiled at this girl, as the other children continued to study the paper. Over the next 2 or 3 minutes, most of the other children placed their pencils on their desks, and raised their hands to inform the teacher that they had completed the task at hand. There were now only 2 students still writing. It was Alpha and the new girl Precious. The other children watched them, as they wrote with purpose and energy. The expressions on the faces of the rest of the class showed they did not understand how this boy and girl could write for so long, on such a simple test. As the clock finally reached 11:10 a.m., Alpha and Precious finally put their pencils down, and silently raised their hands. Mr. Freeman nodded, and moving out of his chair, began to collect the papers from the pupils. As Alpha watched his teacher, the sad boy looked around the room at the sea of confused faces. A single face shone brightly. It was Precious, and she smiled at Alpha again. This time he was able to hold her gaze, and he smiled back at the kind girl. As Mr. Freeman returned to his desk, the boys and girls waited to see his reaction to what they had each written. The teacher quickly went from paper to paper. As he reached the end of the pile, 2 sheets had been placed separately from the rest, and the teacher took his time, as he read the words they contained. When he had finished reading, Mr. Freeman spoke, "I'm not going to grade any of you on this test. I simply want to give you some food for thought. For almost all of you, your attention was drawn to the black dot on the paper. This is precisely what most of you do in life. You give power to the darkness inside of yourself, and mock the darkness, in the lives of those who may not be so fortunate. The class listened intently, as the teacher rose and stood next to Alpha. Mr. Freeman placed his hand on Alpha's shoulder, and the boy looked so incredibly sad. The faces of almost all of the class were filled with shame and embarrassment. The teacher continued to speak. Only 2 of you talked about the white space on the paper. The dark patches are insignificant, in comparison to everything else in your lives, but they nonetheless dominate your minds. Alpha understood his personal lesson, and the class continued to listen, silently and intently. Mr. Freeman continued to speak. The lesson, and the challenge for each of you, is to remove your gaze from the dark areas in your lives. This darkness is your cruel tendencies, and your worry about the things that cause distress in your lives. Be kind to one another, and enjoy each and every one of your blessings, in each and every precious moment that life has to offer. As the teacher finished talking, Alpha looked around the room. He could see the regret and sadness in the faces of the other children, for the way they had been treating him. As Precious smiled again, Alpha felt a new sense of hope and possibility. As the bell rang to end the class, they all understood today's lesson. This would be a lesson they would learn time and time again, for the rest of their lives. So do you, my lovable audience, make the effort to not give power to the darkness in your life. Please try hard to be joyful, and live a life full of kindness, compassion, love, and light. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new teachings. Don't forget to check out the description for this video, because it includes some great links for you. Go make magic in your life and tell us about it in the comments. See you real soon right here at my magic beach.